This episode of Bend in the Knee is brought to you by Beverly of the Wolf's Wood, whose words are, "Not all who wander are lost."
Hello and welcome to Bend the Knee, a Song of Ice and Fire podcast. I am Sir Matt, the Bud Knight.
And I am Sir Ezra the Watchful. Welcome to our Song of Ice and Fire book club. We're excited. We are into Chapter 11, Daenerys, which is Daenerys 2, I believe, right? We are also talking about, we're in the our World of Ice and Fire book, the Targaryen Kings.
Yes, starting with Aegon the First, otherwise known as Aegon the Conqueror.
Right, exactly. So we went over his conquest last week, and we'll be going over just sort of, it gives you a small bit about his reign. I thought it would be longer, but it's
it was a little bit shorter. Yeah.
Now, they do elaborate on some of it in The Sons of the Dragon, but I'll try to pull
We'll get
some
to
of
that.
it. We'll get there.
So, all right, Ez, if you want to send us a raven, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah,
if we want something read on the show, or
which we have a few actually. For today, we always get a bunch for Follow Up Friday, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Send those to btkcast@gmail.com. You can also give us a call at 614-547-2350. Leave a voicemail. We will play that on the show. And yeah, there you go. Little update.
Okay. All right, so we're going to head over to the Small Council. We got some show news, but just real quick, Sir Ezra, how's it going?
It's going well. I just got through one of the most stressful weeks of my life, I think.
Likewise.
One of. So, we're good. We're in good company, by the way.
We are.
So we are working right now currently on some MEAD, meat, and cheese.
It's true. Yeah, it's being prepared in the background. So we have that for our patrons. Sir Ezra and I do some other side projects. Met some pretty cool people this weekend.
We did. Yep.
May help us down the road with some suits of armor.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So that's something to look forward to. We're looking into that. As I will say, guys, real quick, we've been getting a lot of new patrons.
We have.
Cannot thank you enough for the support there.
Yep.
So for those of you guys who have joined, just make sure to hit us up on Facebook, and we'll get your sigils going, your Night's Watch vows, and all that kind of stuff going.
Right, yes. If I send you also a Google form, those of you who have taken the black, I may send you the link to that, and that basically is just it's a form in which you can give me the size of shirt that you would like, and just name and size of shirt so I know where to send it. I already have the address, so we're good to go.
Okay.
We're getting that going. Now, another thing, too, I think a big push here is the I underestimated the goals on Patreon.
Yeah, I did, as did I.
And so I think there's really a push now to get the archery competition in there, the drinking game, and the trial by combat.
Yeah.
And it has to happen now. So
it's going to have to happen. So,
especially since we met those folks who can help us with the armor.
Yeah, and so I've begun my night training.
Yeah.
And so gonna get that going. So.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, all right, some show news for you guys here. So, a lot of this, unfortunately, there was nothing really going on at Not a Blog this week. That is Gur's personal kind of blog.
Is that a good thing, though?
I hope so.
I think that would be a good thing.
Here's hoping. His mood this week is bouncy. He's bouncy a lot. He always he bounces back and forth.
He does, yeah.
But so a lot of times I go on the internet and I will search up just things going on with the show. And sometimes, they come from these kind of almost like clickbait type websites. But here we go. From digitalspy.com.
Look out.
Game of Thrones cast assembles to film final episodes, including some surprise returns. So, I will say that this segment is dark and full of spoilers. So if you do not want the potential of the next season spoiled, maybe just click the 30-second ahead button on the Podbean app.
Yeah, maybe
Okay.
60 seconds because
60
I might
seconds.
freak out here for a sec.
Here we go. So, as we know, a lot of times people will be posting on Instagram, actors, things like that. And as we noticed last week, the actor who played Aegon Targaryen in the flashback stuff posted some things. So we may get a Rhaegar flashback in the upcoming season.
Right.
So this week kind of got that again, and we know that they're getting ready to kind of film the last episode. And sometimes people online have been saying that HBO may have these people kind of may pay these people to come in, fly in, and just throw people off. Because they said the actors had said that they filmed several potential different endings so that no one knew the real ending.
Whoa.
So here we go. This week, you could see that, oh gosh, I cannot see his name. Tom Wallachia and Vladimir Frederick. And Vladimir Frederick is the guy who plays the Night King. Mm-hmm. And so it would make sense that he's going to be there.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe for the final episode. I don't know, depending. We know the Night King and the White Walker army. That's coming there.
Yeah.
But Tom Wallachia plays Jaqen Hagar.
Yeah. Interesting.
So interesting.
Yeah. This is news to me, guys. So I did not.
So there's a lot of potential things there. I think a lot of people were like, oh my God, maybe someone's going to reveal that he's Jaqen Hagar or whatever. If I had to take a guess, I would imagine that the last episode is almost going to be kind of like an epilogue.
Okay.
That's where I'm kind of, or we're definitely going to get some epilogue type stuff.
Okay.
And if I had to take a guess, I would guess that Arya is heading back to the House of Black and White to maybe do some more stuff there. And so maybe we just get like Jaqen Hagar is still there, obviously.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's like him showing up to do some major thing. If I just had to take a guess, I would say that it's him. It's like she runs into him or something.
Yeah. Okay.
Or maybe a cameo or something.
Well, and he could be. Who knows what role he could play?
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things that he could be involved in. So yeah. I mean, I'm interested to see. I actually kind of expected that he would come. Didn't you kind of think maybe he would be a player?
Would see him again? Yeah. I think it's like I think a lot of people think
super important.
There
role,
are people who still believe like Ned Stark is Jaqen Hagar and he's gonna come back and all this stuff. So
interesting. Well, that's cool. That's neat. So anything else though from that article?
Nope, that's it.
That's pretty much it. Okay.
But it's interesting.
Yeah.
That they're kind of there and hanging out, and so people, as I said, HBO does kind of trick people. So
yeah, I mean, Matt and I will be coming up with our own. We've done a bunch of predictions, I think, for season 8, and we're gonna really sit down as we get closer and dive into. We'll have trailers coming up and stuff
absolutely.
soon. So that'll be fun. Well, not soon, but
right.
they'll be here.
Yeah,
before we know
it's coming, just like winter.
Just like winter. Yes, right. All right, awesome. So that is Small Council then, small amount of news there. But let's head over to the Maester's study where we are talking about Aegon Targaryen. Again, this is coming from A World of Ice and Fire, correct? Mm-hmm. And so this is King Aegon, the first of his name. This is actually just a very general, it's more about the creation of turning Aegon's fort into King's Landing. Yeah. And the idea of building a wall around it, and a lot of hinting at the first Dornish War. Yeah. And what happens there. So, you pulled a couple things out here, I think. Did you want to read some of these? Yeah, so this chapter in the World of Ice and Fire book is actually kind of short. I have some pretty, I think, important passages I'll kind of read here. So, King Aegon, the first of his name, might have considered the Seven Kingdoms by the age of... might have conquered the Seven Kingdoms by the age of 27, but now he faced the formidable challenge of ruling his newly formed realm. The Seven, warning... excuse me, sorry, guys, I got to turn this here. We have some onions being prepared. Are you about to start crying?
And it's slightly affecting my vision here, so I got to do some zooming in here real quick.
That's hilarious.
The seven warring kingdoms had rarely been at peace within their own borders, let alone without them. And uniting them under one rule required a truly remarkable man. So it was fortunate for the realm that Aegon was such a man with a vision and determination aplenty. And through his vision of a united Westeros proved harder to realize than Aegon might have believed, not to mention far costlier. It was a vision that shaped the course of history for hundreds of years to come.
Yeah, and so that's interesting. He was the Targaryens that were on Dragonstone, right? They had always looked east, and he is now the one who sets his eyes west. Mm-hmm. And you do have all of these warring kingdoms, right? They're inside, I think, of their own kingdom. There's even uprisings and things, this house versus that house, and they're all taking care of that. But he very much wanted to unite the Seven Kingdoms. And so, and I love how they say that it's the idea that he's faced with the formidable challenge of ruling his newly forged realm. So it's one thing to conquer it; it's another thing to keep it, and to rule it. So
yeah, it's not just about getting to the top; it's about staying on top.
Well, yeah, and quite frankly, when we start this, he has not even conquered Dorne. There was no there was no one there for them to sort of go against in Dorne. So, okay, you want me to read the next one?
Sure, yeah, if you want.
Okay, so according to the history of Archmaester, is it
Galdane?
Galdane?
Yeah.
It was suggested at court that Aegon leave Queen Visenya in charge of building the Red Keep so that he would not have to endure her presence on Dragonstone. In their later years, their relationship, never a warm one, began with...
never worn one to begin with.
Right. Had grown even more distant.
Sir Ezra is also being affected by the...
I'm starting to. I'm watching
you
cry over
the
there,
onions going. Yeah, it's okay, guys. We have a Patreon episode coming up. We're going to record after this, and we're doing some onions. We got some pretty pungent ones here.
They're being cut right now live on the show.
So it's okay. Yeah. So so that is one thing that we kind of know is going on, is that Visenya of the two wives, you'll have Visenya and Rhaenys, is that he loved them both, but he was always much more fond of Rhaenys.
Yes,
although she was not as fond of him.
Right. Well, she's just more playful. Just,
right.
I think lived it up a little bit more artsy, etc. And at least that's the feel that you get. But he spent more nights with her than he did with Visenya, right? And I almost wonder sometimes in this relationship if it's like it's a way to keep the bloodlines going. It's a way to it's a duty to them. They have to do it, really. You know what I mean? Because later on you get in a situation where they don't have to. I mean, he actually goes against it wasn't out of the norm, but do you remember when it was talking about how he decided to take both of his sisters as wives instead of just one,
right?
And I think maybe it was because you normally take the older sister, and he was closer with his younger sister. Yeah, and that's so there's that whole piece. But yeah, and she's also Visenya's into some sorcery, and things of that nature. So, but she very much cares for Aegon, and you'll see that here in just a little bit as we continue to talk about this. But and she kind of cares about their legacy quite a bit. Yeah. So, which is interesting. Yeah,
and you see that later in the protection that she wants to have going. Okay. Yeah. So right here, as the city and its prosperity grew, so did that of the realm. This was in part due to the conqueror's efforts to win the respect of his vassals and that of the small folk. In this, he was often aided by Queen Rhaenys whilst she lived, for whom the small folk were of special concern. She was likewise a patron to singers and bards, something her sister Queen Visenya thought a waste, but those singers made songs of praise for the Targaryens and carried them throughout the realm. And if those songs also contained bold lies that made Aegon and his sister seem all the more glorious, the queen did not rue it, although the maesters might.
Right, yes. And again, this is being written and told from the maester's perspective, right?
Exactly.
So there must have been a lot of songs, correct, about Rhaenys and Visenya and Aegon and the Targaryens and how great they are.
Right.
Which is cool. So, yeah, and that made sense that Rhaenys is the one, as I just mentioned, who's into that type of thing. She's more playful, more flirtatious, into the arts, likes to admire those things, and that's just where she's at,
think about. Just look at today, like just in general in history, the power of propaganda and what it does. You know what I mean? So that does carry a lot of weight and stuff like that. And back in those days, what's going to be carried around the realm when you don't have that kind of transportation, that kind of immediate access, songs,
right?
Hearing stories and legends and stuff like that. So,
well, I think your next point here you make. You say that it talks about how the queen also did much to bring the realm together through the marriages that she arranged between the different houses, and that's interesting, right? That ability is pretty key. You could get two warring houses or regions to kind of come together just based upon marriage.
Yeah.
which is actually led to fast forward what happens with Dorne a little bit later.
Well, and I think it shows to Aegon and these Targaryens when we read the chapter last week. We talked about how when he came to Westeros, one of the first things he did was he created we're going to create House Targaryen. We get the banners,
yes,
and it was then, and they put the crowns on their heads that they understand the culture, and so it makes it a lot it's a lot easier to ingrain yourself into that culture rather than just try to destroy that culture, which is something we see Daenerys struggle with later.
Well, and it's also a theme to the idea that you're not going to immediately, snap things to your will or to your way, because they allow these 7 kingdoms to still be run and governed by those regional, houses. So they put the Lannisters back in charge, right? They keep them. The Starks are still going to kind of control the North and what have you. They're just all under one king now, So, and he actually says that the laws were different from land to land. So as he traveled, if he was going up to the North, the laws might be different there. And so when he would sit in court, Aegon made sure that he knew what their laws and customs were, and he said that was for another king to change. And one of his heirs would have to eventually, over time, get them all to come under one law, one set of laws.
Right. Well, that's kind of been something that has been, this has kind of been a theme we've seen in almost every chapter in this book, particularly, and we see it in the main series as well, where remember we were talking about. In the Iron Islands, how the Andals tried to instill the 7, and it worked for a little bit, and then they just got rid of it. It didn't work. And then how just how the pact. Okay, we're going to keep the Weirwoods, but it's always this constant ingraining culture and what works and adopting the 7. And even to look at some of the chapters we already read, where even still to I guess. Present time. In the show, we were rewatching the show right now. We watched the clip of Joffrey talking to Cersei at the very first couple episodes, where Joffrey's talking about what he would do if he were king, and how he would demand that the North pay taxes and all of this stuff. And Cersei says, "Well, the North is too big; it's too wild. It doesn't work up there." Right. And even in the kingdoms we have now inside the realm, you just can't do it. Everybody has their own cultures.
Well, that's why what happens with the Boltons is that they want someone who, from that region who could rule that region. You know what I mean? Kind of pass the power, over to another house or what have you. So, yeah, very good point. Let's see. So next we have, here we go. So they mention again that Rhaenys' death in Dorne in about 10 AC, which is after Aegon's conquest, or after the conquest, and the wrath that followed it, was felt by the realm, who had loved the beautiful, kind-hearted queen. So just to kind of follow up on that, they make another mention that she does die, and they talk about that Dornish war that they're hinting at there. So, yet despite a reign covered in glory, the First Dornish War stood out as Aegon's one great defeat. The First Dornish War began boldly in 4 AC and ended in 13 AC after years of tragedy.
Yeah.
And I think that's a long time.
Yeah.
Right? I think the reason, just to make a connection to today, we often in our country and other countries talk about the War on Terror. And how, it's difficult, that tactic that they're using in Dorne is could be kind of similar, right? It's sort of a go in, hit it, move. It's very small forces. It's I don't know. It's just different. It kind of reminded me of that, and it's interesting that that's what took that long. And I think it ends up being some marriage pacts and some different things that help bring that. But no, that's the First Dornish War. Yeah. So there's many, there are other ones,
many to come.
So yeah, there's that. But anyways, that was definitely tough for Aegon.
Yeah.
All right, last thing we got here.
I have a couple of things here. So I'm going to read this kind of passage here. There were some other things that they talked about. They talked about the rule of 6. Did you see? So in the chapter where they talked about some things that while Aegon was gone, Visenya kind of did. So the rule of 6 was that you could essentially beat your wife with a rod no thicker than your thumb. something about like you could hit her. You're supposed to be able to hit her 6 times or something like that. This guy,
the rule of thumb.
yeah, and then she like changed that and let this guy be beat.
Right. Is that basically there was she could take 6 beatings for the 6 different gods or deities of the 7, but the final one, the stranger, being death, that final blow should never take place.
Right.
Because that's just one too many. That equates to death. And I believe she was killed by her husband. And so all of her brothers were allowed to then, however many times he beat her or hit her, he confirmed it, the husband confirmed it and thought it was fair and lawful. They were then allowed to beat him that many times minus the 6.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting that they talked about that. And then really the last thing is it talks about Aegon's death and kind of what happens there.
Well, actually, wait, right before that, see if you can find the Kingsguard. I didn't have my book in front of me, but
yeah.
Because Visenya very much so.
Yeah, I have that. Okay, I have that right here.
Okay.
It was Visenya, not Aegon, who decided the nature of the Kingsguard. 7 champions for the Lord of the 7 Kingdoms, who would all be knights. It says she kind of models it after the Night's Watch.
Yeah.
But the reason she did it was, right here. Despite all this, the king believed that his knights were enough, like his personal guard was enough. When Aegon and Visenya placed prizes on the heads, many were murdered. And this is talking about Dornish. They were kind of trying to deal with the Dornish thing. On one occasion in 10 AC, Aegon and Visenya were both attacked in the streets of King's Landing, and if not for Visenya and Dark Sister, big deal.
Yep.
The king might not have survived. It is recorded that Aegon pointed out his guardsmen who was protecting him, and Visenya drew Dark Sister and cut his cheek before the guards could react. Your guards are slow and lazy, Visenya is reported to have said, and the king was forced to agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she was just trying to show him, look, even I can quickly get to you. Now, first of all, Visenya is no slouch. And she
absolutely
is very
not.
much.
Yeah, she's a boss.
She's much more of a. I think she actually, Aegon is during that assassination attempt, is either wounded or something.
Right.
She is the one. If it weren't for her, he would not have made it. Mm-hmm. So she is looking out after her younger brother,
right,
taking care of him,
husband.
So husband. Well, yeah,
husband.
But,
yeah.
So anyways, that was pretty neat. They mentioned the original 7 as well. I think House Darkland is in there. Do you have the names there? Like that's a name that kind of a lot of them have been in the.
Yes, Sir Corals Valerion, the First Lord Commander, Sir Richard Root, Sir Addison Hill, Bastard of Cornfield, Sir Gregor Good, and Sir Griffith Good, brothers, Sir Humphrey the Mummer, a hedge knight, and Sir Robin Darkland, called Dark Robin, the first of many Darklands to wear the white cloak.
Yeah, the first of many Darklands. Yeah, which is cool. I think you've got a Tristan Darkland later or something, or Tristane. Now, what was interesting is Visenya decided too they weren't going to hold some tourney for this, really. So they were going to pick, basically the best of the best. Did it talk about how she picked those though? Because I thought she said that she didn't want to do like a regular tourney to pick the 7. They had to be knights.
The king entrusted Visenya with selecting the first members of the order, and history shows he was wise to do so. Two died defending him, and all served to the end of their days with honor. The White Book recounts their names.
It might have been before that. I can't remember. I should have brought my book with me, but
I have it. I have my book in front of me. I don't
see it.
I don't see it. It could be in another chapter. And sometimes you go to the wiki and it pulls from a lot of different things.
Right. Yeah. Well, anyways, because basically from then on out, it takes like it takes the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard or one of the Kingsguard essentially to. There's a ceremony, and it's basically they then will bring in their own replacements and stuff. So because they're the ones worthy to really once they found the best of the best, it's that they're passing it down. Now they assess who is worthy to enter, their ranks.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah. Okay. So I have one last passage here. This is talking about his death and kind of what happens.
Yeah.
He died where he had been born, on his beloved Dragonstone. The accounts agree that he was in the chamber of the painted table, recounting to his grandsons Aegon and Viserys the tales of his conquest, when he stumbled in his speech and collapsed. It was a stroke, the maester said, and the dragon passed quickly and in peace. His body was burned in the yard of Dragonstone's citadel, as was the custom of the Targaryens and the Valyrians before them. Aenys, the prince of Dragonstone and the heir to the Iron Throne, was at Highgarden when he learned of his father's death, and swiftly flew on his dragon to receive his crown. But all who followed Aegon the Conqueror of the Iron Throne found the realm far less amenable to their rule.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So basically he, besides the issue with Dorne that he had there, his rule goes pretty well in the rest of the other kingdoms, and was able to hold it well and create some laws and build up King's Landing. It was Aegon's fort that I think at one point, I can't remember, they had the dates mentioned in there, 17 AC perhaps, or 10 AC, he starts to kind of really build the Red Fort up a little bit more, and then they tore it down and started to build by stone, and I think that's when you get the designers, coming in there, and it's got secret passageways and all that good stuff, which we will get into later. It wasn't mentioned in this part, but
this chapter actually, cool. I was surprised at how short it was.
Me too. I think it's because
there's not a lot
that
about
construction. Him. Will continue, and then they talk about it later on.
Yeah,
and also. The one thing that they did mention in this that was kind of neat was the rating, that he was concerned about ruling his people and keeping his people safe.
Right.
So I thought that was pretty huge. I mean, people, the small folk, right, are singing their praises. I think they were good to people.
Yeah.
And you could see when he would conquer different, kingdoms, if you bend the knee,
absolutely,
then he's willing to give you back your seat and help me govern, and but you're gonna listen to what I say. You're gonna fall in line.
Absolutely.
And he showed that he was a good, competent ruler, and he builds that wall around King's Landing to kind of keep the raiding and the pirates out, because they had raided somewhere.
Right.
Was it the Summer Islands? I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they had gotten thousands of people from a city, these pirates, and they had sold them into slavery. And he's like, not my people.
Absolutely.
It's not going to happen, because the small folk, people in the area, were coming to him. They were, this city was growing. King's Landing was growing and growing and growing. And he actually left room for it to grow and put the walls out even further than where the city was.
Correct.
Foreseeing that it would grow.
Yeah.
So, which was cool.
Yeah, and the other thing is that we will definitely come back to Aegon the Conqueror, because he is mentioned a lot just throughout the main series, and later this year when Fire and Blood comes out, I'm guessing we're going to get a ton more backstory on him.
For sure.
And it's going to be a lot more expansive, and potentially, one of the prequels is going to be Aegon's conquest. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So, okay.
All right, I think that's it for the Maester's study. That was a good one. Let's jump into the reread for this week. We are on Chapter 11, Daenerys 2, but let's recap Chapter 10, Jon 2.
Yes.
The whores were wailing. It's just the alliteration there. When Tyrion Lannister announced that he was intending to go north to the Wall. Now wait a second. Is that?
I think we didn't. I think we didn't update it, Sir Ezra.
I was gonna say that. Had you copy that? So Jon, that is not the one we want. So let's see. Last chapter then with Jon. Let's see. He was
Jon's giving Arya a needle, and he's visiting Bran.
Right, and he goes up to he has the confrontation with Catelyn, and basically that doesn't go as he wanted it to go, but he's saying goodbye is harder and harder, and he ends up giving Arya a needle, and
it was kind of a shorter
goodbye.
chapter.
Yeah, it was short. He says goodbye to Robb too, which is emotional. It's the last time he sees Robb, and takes off there. So, okay, now the summary for Daenerys 2. We've broken this down into three different headings here. We've got Dany's dream, the wedding, and the Dothraki bedding ceremony. Mm-hmm. So Dany is having a dream about the dragon, the possibly I almost want to say the dragon reborn, but that's another series.
That is another series.
So she's having her dream, and it's not a good dream. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
And she is at her wedding ceremony, and a doll wedding would be 3 or less killed. That does not happen. This is not a doll wedding. And Dany then has an intimate scene with her new husband, Khal Drogo.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about that last week was kind of our Send the Raven, and we just watched that episode today, and it's quite different in the book and the show. We're gonna be doing book show comparisons, but I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit here. But we'll go ahead and start with the dream here. I have the clip pulled up. I have the passage pulled up.
Okay.
Yet that night she dreamt of one. Viserys was hitting her, hurting her. She was naked, clumsy with fear. She ran from him, but her body seemed thick and ungainly. He struck her again. She stumbled and fell. "You woke the dragon," he screamed as he kicked her. "You woke the dragon, you woke the dragon." Her thighs were slick with blood. She closed her eyes and whimpered. And if in answer there was a hideous ripping sound and the cracking of some great fire. When she looked again, Viserys was gone. Great columns of flame rose all around, and in the midst of them was the dragon. It turned its giant head slowly. When its molten eyes found her, she woke, shaking and covered with a fine sheen of sweat. She had never been so afraid until the day of her wedding came at last.
Right. And I think that actually says a lot, right?
Yes.
So Viserys is always talking about the
waking the dragon,
right? Don't wake the dragon, etc. No, I think it's time to wake the dragon, and I think she did. And she's dreaming about being hurt and the things that happened to her, and she's nervous and she's afraid. And the dragon comes to her aid in this dream, and she's afraid, right? But just because it's always been something that the connotation has always been be afraid and be scared of this. And then this is one of the first times, well, this is Dany too, but one of the first times, I guess, where you start to hear her really embody her Targaryen heritage.
Right.
I am the blood of the dragon. Right. She says that how many times in this? Quite a few. And it's interesting. So I think she's starting to kind of be emboldened, right, a little bit, and really, take this mantle on, I guess.
Yeah.
Now, right before that, the piece here that I wanted to kind of mention was that I never really, when I first read this, didn't quite get this. After the ceremony, there's a process here. They actually have to take her to Vaes Dothrak. Right?
Yes.
Did I say that right? Close
Vaes
enough?
Dothrak. The interesting thing is that Sir Ezra and I listened to the audiobook.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different pronunciations between the show and the books. And at least the way the audiobook is portrayed. Yeah. Like things like he calls it, like he almost calls her like, it's almost like Brian, the way he pronounces Brienne of Tarth.
Right, yeah, right.
Or like Brie, like it's just, it's always throwing us off. So, yeah. But I believe, Vaes Dothrak is
okay.
Worth, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's actually a place where the wives of all the old, cows are at, the cows are at. They basically, like, she has to, I guess, get their approval. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
So they're going to take, it's their holy city.
Yes.
Is basically what it is. And they're not allowed to take weapons in, etc. And stuff. So I never really knew where they were like marching to. You know what I mean? And somebody was asking me the other day, like, what are they going back to, Khal Drogo's house or something? So
yeah. And that is kind of a interesting thing. Is I recently just plowed through the first book, and it in the show, Maester Illyrio says to Viserys is like, why aren't we going the right way? Like, I want my army, I want it now.
Right.
When will we march? And Magister Illyrio says when it favors war.
Yeah, when there's signs and their omens,
correct,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually, I think, did they mention that in this chapter, actually?
Yeah.
I think they do, don't they? Or maybe that was the show. We just
maybe
watched
it was the show, yeah.
He's like, piss on their omens, right? Piss on Dothraki omens. Well, here's a bit about Viserys just basically being kind of just arrogant over whatever. Yeah. So he's talking to Jorah, right, about how they're traveling to Dothrak, and he is telling him to be patient, Your Grace. The Dothraki are true to their word, but they do things in their own time. A lesser man may beg for a favor from the call, but must never presume to berate him. Viserys was upset about that. He said, "Guard your tongue, Mormont, or I'll have it cut out. I am no lesser man. I am the rightful lord of the Seven Kingdoms. The dragon does not beg. Yes. I just put next to that ironic because he's called the Beggar King.
Exactly.
You know, and I think it's interesting. That is exactly what he's doing. He is begging for an army, and he's wanting them to go this way or that way, right? So,
yeah. You know, not to jump down a rabbit hole here.
Yeah, I'm totally in favor.
But
of that.
we do that, and maybe it's in the books, and I'm missing something. But you know, I still find this. We were talking about this earlier. I kind of find this whole bit interesting.
Yeah.
Why do Viserys and Magister Illyrio let Daenerys be sold to Khal Drogo?
Well, married to.
Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Do they honestly believe that they could convince him to actually mark? Because I think their idea would be, hey, we're going to put a Targaryen back on the throne.
Yeah. Well, and I think perhaps he really will. I mean, if they are true to their word, they actually eventually will give him this army. But he wants it like immediately, like
Right.
2 days into the marriage.
Right.
Whereas they're all trying to give him counsel, like you have to wait. And I think, you know, what's a few more, you know, months or, you know,
Right.
years. You've waited, you know, for your whole life. And, you know, we need they have their own way of doing things, their own procedure. They've never crossed the narrow sea, you know,
Yeah.
and so that's just not something they're comfortable with. So you're going to have to really, they have no idea what their history is over there. The Targaryens, they don't really care, you know?
Yeah.
So I think part of it was, this is one way to do it, because you have the younger sister who is not necessarily the next, like the heir, right?
Correct, yeah.
And so, yeah, maybe we could try this route and get her brother an army or what have you. But then with Viserys, you still have him. He's still an eligible bachelor. He could still marry into another house, or, you know, he could, if he just marries his sister, you know, then what do they have? They have nothing together.
Yeah.
Right? So if his sister is married to, you know, a very powerful Khal Drogo, then that's cool. But he himself needs to make an alliance elsewhere. If I were Illyrio, that's what I'd be working towards. You know what I mean? And maybe they were.
Right.
Maybe there's just a way in which they're handling.
Yeah, I
because
guess.
Viserys is very,
I guess for me, maybe it's because Khal Drogo has, you know, an army that's reported of like 100,000.
Yeah.
Correct. But it seems to me, Magister Illyrio seems like a pretty wealthy guy. Don't you think that just hiring like an enormous army of sellswords might be an easier way to get a big army?
Well, and they are actually, what's very interesting is that Illyrio is doing that with Aegon.
Exactly.
Which is very interesting when you read this now and you think about it. How is it that did they not know? Did they keep those two separate from the either, you know, is it actually Aegon?
Correct. Yeah.
You know, or is it a Blackfire that they're putting up? But John Connington has him, and so I believe Illyrio is the one working with them and sets them up, and actually gives them instructions to go hire the Golden Company and to the Second Son, the different. Can't remember which one it is that they go to hire, but yeah. You know, that is very interesting. And now he does have a lot of money, but think, you know, Khal Drogo comes along, and they've been, just to avoid war and stuff, they have to give a few presents and gifts and slaves and money and stuff. So and it's a peaceful sort of like, here you go. You're
maybe it's just their kind of, you know, because Varys always says, you know, I try to do what's best for the realm.
Yeah.
And so maybe he's just kind of like, well, I kind of got this project over here, this project
Right.
over here. Because I don't believe that Varys specifically is like, well, I want Viserys on the throne, or I want Daenerys.
No,
on
I think
the
they
throne.
think he's incompetent, and he's
It's just one thing I've always kind of thought about, and I don't see a lot of people asking questions about it.
That's a great question.
And so hopefully that answers some questions for some other people as we try to answer questions ourselves.
Sometimes we go down a rabbit hole and we actually pull a rabbit back out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, magic trick happening live. No, I don't know. Tell us what you think about that, because that is, I just literally thought of that, and I'm going to think about it more. I'm actually making note right now to go back and look at that stuff that goes down with Aegon, and how when Tyrion gets over to Illyrio, you know, and is introduced to young Griff, what all that means.
Right.
When did that happen? You know, etc. So, all right. So moving ahead here, the dream we've talked about, we've set the scene there.
Yeah. So then we kind of get to the wedding itself.
Right.
And Dany is there, and she's sitting very high up with Khal Drogo, and you know it's just kind of. I think the show is I think is almost kind of a better scene of just kind of getting the perspective of what's going on, because you see like Viserys talking and you see some other things.
Sure.
Whereas it's just from Daenerys' perspective.
Right, we're limited. Yeah.
Yeah, in the book, and it's just kind of people are just kind of coming up and giving her presents.
Yeah.
And
now I don't know if you're gonna make this point, but I want to jump in before you go any further. The just where they were where they were sitting at, it actually is a place of high honor.
Yeah.
And where they were sitting, just below the Khal Zone Blood Riders. But Viserys is like, ticked about it, sort of, pissed, irritated that he's sitting below his sister. You know?
Yeah, right here there was a place. Theirs was a place of high honor just below the Khal's own Blood Riders, but Dany could see the anger in her brother's lilac eyes. He did not like sitting beneath her, and he fumed when slaves offered each dish first to the Khal and his bride, and served him from the portions they refused. He could do nothing but nurse his resentment, so nurse it he did, his mood growing blacker by the hour at each insult to his person.
It's just ridiculous. I mean, like, he's so entitled to just be, that I don't know. I have no idea how he thinks he's going to win back the Seven Kingdoms with this type of attitude. And again, he has no mentor. He really has no one else to sort of humble him or give him good counsel. So he really hasn't had that. I mean, he was raised a prince, and so we've talked about the difference between he and Dany. But anywho.
Yeah. And then it goes kind of Dany's perspective. There was no one to talk to. Khal Drogo shouted commands and just down to his Blood Riders and laughed at their replies, but he scarcely glanced at Dany beside him. They had no common language. And so then we get Dany sitting there, and she's just kind of talking to herself.
Yeah.
I'm the blood of the dragon, she told herself. I am Daenerys Stormborn, Princess of Dragonstone, and the blood and seed of Aegon the Conqueror.
And I gotta say, that is one, since we just did Aegon's conquest, to hear her kind of say to herself that she is the seed of Aegon the Conqueror is pretty powerful, actually, to hear her say that. And to think that the Seven Kingdoms were ruled by him, and then they're just so the way they're cast out is crazy. They want to hunt down all the Targaryens. Robert Baratheon wants to kill them all.
Yeah,
he wants there to be no chance of any of them ever coming back. And it's weird that like at the start, now that we've gone to the end and then back again, I'm like rooting. We are always rooting for Dany, I guess, from the get go. But like, really, when you look at it, like you said this before, the Targaryens, because of the Mad King, are painted out to be a bad group of people. I don't know. I'm rooting for them. So
people even talk about it, and even Robert kind of says later, like, I'm not a good king.
Yeah,
and like he
does things that aren't kingly.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does things that aren't kingly when he hits Cersei later, and things like that. He's like a drunk, and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah. Agreed. Now, during this wedding ceremony, Dany was prepped for a couple things that would happen. They basically mate one another in a way that is very.
I have it pulled up here. Yeah, the warriors were watching too. One of them finally stepped into the circle, grabbed a dancer by the arm, pushed her down on the ground, and mounted her right there, as a stallion mounts the mare. Illyrio told her that might happen. The Dothraki mate like the animals in their herds. There is no privacy in a Khalasar, and they do not understand sin or shame as we do.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, interesting. I mean, that's some old. That's the customs. That's their way of doing things. Can we get that in the Bill of Rights? I don't know.
Whoa.
That's funny. I'm just kidding. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But that was one of two things that she was sort of prepped for. That would be kind of like, this is going to be a little. Be ready when you see this happen, because it happens right away. Now, as it's happening, more of them are mounting up, right? And then you have a fight break out.
Yeah.
Right. And she was prepped that if 3 or less killings at a wedding is considered a boring event. And how many does it say there were? Like a dozen? Let me see. It actually gives a number. Yeah. Okay, so her wedding must have been especially blessed. Before the day was over, a dozen men had died. So they get up and they fight. It's a pretty graphic little scene where a guy is cut open. Now, you've been looking into the weaponry, right? Yeah. And, some of their, what do you call it?
The Aurochs.
The Aurochs? Yeah.
Yeah, so actually in the show, it's explained. And this is kind of a thing. So one thing I want to say, as I've been because we just started rewatching some of these things, getting ready for these, and there's a lot of some people complain, well, this isn't in the this isn't in the books, this isn't in the show, but they add context and things like that, and it tells you kind of what else is happening in the scene, because sometimes it'll say in a chapter, well, like Mance Rayder, for example. Well, Mance Rayder was at Winterfell.
Yeah.
During that scene. So we may find something else that happens later where somebody references something to a scene, and you can kind of add that in, and it may not happen in that specific chapter, but it may be told about later, and so you can go back. And
well, that is the whole point for a reread, isn't it?
Exactly,
To go back and like, whoa, we're thinking about that. Because like I just mentioned earlier, the Aegon bit, young Griff.
Yeah.
To think back, as we're reading right now, and know that where is he at this point in time? And who is he working with?
Exactly, yeah. So anyway, in the show, Jorah Mormont is talking, I can't remember, he's talking to one of his Blood Riders? One of the Blood Riders, I believe, and he's talking about the Eric, which is kind of that crescent sword, and so that has some cooler, I guess, things they're talking about. On horseback, it's kind of neat because, like, I guess, like if you want to behead someone, that like curved blade, it's almost it's like a scythe, I guess. You think like a scythe, but it's got that curved blade, so it allows you to do different things. But he's talking about how against plate, it's not something you could say stab someone with, and that's why you would want more of like a broadsword or like a bastard sword, where it's got that point at the end. So like that's just some of the differences in the weaponry.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's pretty neat. I think it is. It adds to. I mean, we can see it. In our minds, we start to kind of understand that it's a different culture, different way of living and stuff. And I thought, like you said, the armor piercing bit with the long sword, right? I guess I really hadn't thought too much about the differences and what their functions would be, and how,
that's
how
why
you combat one with the other.
Exactly, and that's why when they actually get into the tactics of things, and they say quite a bit that, like, well, if Robert Baratheon, they say that the Dothraki would never be able to siege a castle because they don't have, they don't have ladders and battering rams and things like that. That you need different things to siege castle. But they said in the open field, well, the Dothraki are gonna like wreck you,
right?
And even when you go watch the last season where they have the battle of the Lannisters versus Daenerys when the Dothraki come, and the Lannister army, they can put down their shield wall and their spears. But once the Dothraki get through that, then they're like jumping off horseback and and stuff like that, and they're really skilled archers,
right, off of horseback. Yeah. I know. It's the idea too that they're all mounted. It's just it's an army of cavalry. It's crazy. So anywho, let's see here. So Dany is starting to get kind of nervous. About she's thinking ahead to the bedding ceremony. She's starting to kind of be nervous about that, but she keeps telling herself, I am the blood of the dragon. When at last, the sun was low in the sky, Khal Drogo clapped his hands together, and the drums and the shouting and the feast came to a sudden halt. He stood, he pulled Dany to her feet. It was time for her bride's gifts. And these are pretty neat.
Yeah. So I would say the two kind of the big ones, I would say, there's three. I would say there's three very important gifts. Ser Jorah Mormont apologized for his gift. It's a small thing, my princess, but all a poor exile could afford. He said as he laid a small stack of old books before her. They were the histories and songs of the 7 kingdoms she saw written in the common tongue. She thanked him with all of her heart.
Yep.
Then I would say kind of the big one here. Magister Illyrio murmured a command, and 4 burly slaves hurried forward, bearing between them a great cedar chest bound in bronze. When she opened it, she found piles of the finest velvets and damasks the free cities could produce, and resting atop, nestled in the soft cloth, 3 huge eggs. Dany gasped. They were the most beautiful things she'd ever seen, each different than the others, patterned in such rich colors that at first she thought they were crusted with jewels, and so large it took both of her hands to hold one. And this is just talking about the eggs, and each of them are slightly different. Dragon eggs from the Shadowlands beyond the Ashai, said Magister Illyrio. The eons have turned them to stone, yet they still burn bright with beauty.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's pretty neat actually. And it mentions that there are more eggs.
There's still a bunch
Just the
out
way
there.
that reads is that there are other eggs. Which is neat. Now, one of the gifts that I in the beginning, and we sometimes skip over it, but it's just because it was like air quote here, Viserys' gift, not necessarily, but her servants.
Which is it's just
Which is neat, but they play these are characters who you see stick with her, throughout. So like Irri and Jiqui are pretty cool. They teach her the Dothraki language and what have you. So pretty neat.
okay. So actually, our cool connection this week is dragon eggs.
Oh, cool.
So I might just go ahead and jump into that, and then we'll get to the rest of the gifts and stuff like that. Yeah. So dragon eggs here come in various colors. Judging from the color of Daenerys Targaryen's dragons, the coloring of the eggshell appears to indicate the coloring of the dragon within. Dragons have been known to lay eggs in a clutch of up to at least 5, and a dragon may lay several clutches during its lifetime. Although it is subject to dragon mating habits is debatable. Some maesters believe that if a dragon never laid an egg in its lifetime, it must be a male. Whether an egg has to be fertilized by a male dragon in order for it to hatch is not known. So there is and this is from the wiki, so this is taken from like everything, from anytime they're referenced and things like that. When a new member of House Targaryen was born, it is tradition to place a dragon egg in their cradle.
Yeah.
And if the dragon hatched, it is considered a sign that the baby was a true Targaryen. If it did not hatch, or if the dragon born was weak or it died quickly, it was considered to be a bad omen. The tradition continued even after the last dragon, which is Rhaegar Targaryen, died and the eggs stopped hatching, and these dragon eggs were cherished possessions of their owners. The last Targaryen dragon laid a clutch of 5 eggs. What happened to them is not known, and it just kind of goes on a little bit further than that. And then it talks a little bit about attempts to hatch dragon eggs.
Yeah,
and so after the extinction of the dragons in 153 AC, the Targaryens made numerous attempts to hatch the dragon eggs left behind. King Aegon III, the Dragon's Bane, sent away for 9 mages from Essos and his hands Viserys' suggestions. However, the attempt to use their magic to kindle a clutch proved to be a failure. Then it talks about King Baelor prayed over his eggs and tried to use sorcery. The tragedy of Summerhall with Egg. Aegon V attempted to hatch dragons. We don't really know exactly what happened there.
Right, exactly.
Still may be alive. Theoretically, he may not have died there. It says he died, but we haven't got that far in Dunk and Egg yet, so I'm still holding out.
Okay.
And then it says that Ares the Second, Mad King, tried to hatch some, and things like that. So.
Right, and we actually one of the prizes. You remember this in the second Blackfire Rebellion during the Dunk and Egg series. Was a dragon egg, wasn't it? Yeah, they went up to look for it, and it was like stolen. And Dunk was in there looking at it, and I think he, as an idiot, was like walking over and wanted to like touch it, didn't he? So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and then on the wiki, it actually lists about I'd say almost 20 known dragon eggs that come up, and just kind of like where they are or maybe what happened to them. Like here it says Prince Jakari's Valyrian's egg placed in his cradle at his birth by royal decree hatched into the dragon Vermax, and it just kind of goes on. And there's some more 7 eggs used by King Aegon V, which is egg at a ceremony that caused the tragedy at Summerhall. Some of these may have been the unhatched eggs mentioned. And then it shows something. So there's just different.
So there's
eggs.
A lot on that page.
There's a lot, and then some of them they reference the color. Some they don't. Like Drogon's egg is black as the midnight sea. Rhaegal's egg, deep green. And these are the eggs that Dany gets. And it describes them in the chapter. Viserion's is colored pale cream streaked with gold.
Yeah.
And one other thing I found, just doing some research, I don't remember where this is referenced or anything, but some people believe that Drogon is actually reincarnation of the
Balerion.
Balerion, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Due to his
Balerion
enormous
Black,
size,
yeah. What, the dread, yeah. Holy, that's interesting. That's kind of cool. Or, I mean, maybe since we don't really know which eggs came where and what have you in these clutches, maybe a descendant.
Yeah, right directly. Here, A Clash of Kings, Chapter 12, Daenerys 1. Thanks, Wiki.
Yeah, there you go.
Kind of breaks that in. Yeah. So
nice. And people have paid a lot of attention to the different colorings here and to see where these eggs might have been. Because they do describe that egg that's in Butterwell's place at his tourney, and I kind of wonder how it fits in. So we can look that up later, maybe, and do some more stuff on Follow Up Friday with that. And that'd be kind of cool. So
okay,
the only other wedding gift to sort of get to is Khal Drogo's.
And last of all,
oh no, I'm sorry, his blood riders give a gift, which they traditionally give back, which she has to give back to Khal Drogo.
Yeah, usually they give weapons.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's like three weapons, and so she knows the custom is to re-gift.
Well, and it's important later. It actually is way important later because she takes them and then just hands them back to the blood riders, because the blood riders are sworn to take, if a cow dies, are sworn to take her to Vasothrak. Yeah.
Okay.
And she like takes them all, and she just hands here's the bow, here's the and whatever, and hands them to the people when she's like, no, I'm pretty much your Khaleesi now.
Yep.
But so then the last one, and last of all, Khal Drogo brought forth his own bride gift to her. An expectant hush rippled out from the center of the camp as he left her side, growing until it had swallowed the whole Khalasar. When he returned, the dense press of the Dothraki gift givers parted before him and led the horse to her. She was a young filly, spirited and splendid. Dany knew just enough about horses to know that this was no ordinary animal. There was something about her that took the breath away. She was gray as the winter sea, with a mane like silver smoke.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this is actually one of those things back to, Lady Cat and Maester Jaime talking about in their last Raven the difference here, because
big difference.
Right, yeah, you start to see, I think Khal Drogo says something, and Illyrio translates it and says that he says silver for the hair, silver for the silver of your hair. Which is interesting, and Dany thinks it's beautiful. Jorah gives her, the prompt. Well, this is the cool part, is he just like Khal Drogo just picks her up real easy, puts her on the horse, boom, there you go, and she rides it around for a bit.
Yeah, and she kind of rides off, and then he kind of follows her, but they're more in the show they still end up kind of at a secluded kind of area.
Yeah, in this one, she rides for a little bit, and then and comes back, and then it's basically time for the betting ceremony, my friend. You know?
Guys. So for those of you who like the PG-13 part, thanks for listening.
Right.
And because we're about to enter a little segment I sometimes like to refer to as, brought to you by George R.R. Martin, Bend the Knee After Hours. So
for sure.
So it starts off, and again, big difference between the show and the book. We kind of talked about this a little bit different than last week, although there are some things that do kind of happen where he does kind of say no a lot, where she's like, do you know you speak common tongue, stuff like that.
Right.
But it is more of a, like Khal Drogo is kind of like, he's like really kind of peaceful. He's not really forceful.
No, not at all. I mean, one of the things that he says here to start, she says to him first, tell Khal Drogo that he has given me the wind. And then once that's translated, Dany saw her new husband smile for the first time. And I think it's pretty genuine. And then there's this idea, it's time to get up on the Blood Rider, it's time for them to leave the ceremony, and his Blood Riders bring forth his horse, which is interesting. It's a lean red stallion, and hers is this silver white. Okay, again, there's those colors, fire, Song of Fire and Ice. I just thought that was kind of interesting. Reference, small, but something.
Yeah, she keeps talking about, I am the blood of the dragon, I am the blood of the dragon, and so they kind of get off the. They get off the horses. She kind of starts to cry, and he says no. But it says here, like, he lifted up his hand and rubbed away the tears, roughly with a callous thumb, but he's still, you speak the common tongue, Dany said in wonder. No, he says again. Perhaps he only had that word. Drogo touched her hair lightly, sliding the silver blonde strands between his fingers, and murmured softly in Dothraki. Dany didn't understand it. He put a finger under her chin and lifted his head, and he was looking into her eyes. he takes her like lightly under the arms.
Well, one thing that says too is that yet there was warmth in his tone. She didn't understand his words, but there was a tenderness that she had not expected from this man.
Yeah.
Which again is just basically exactly what they were talking about in their Raven last week. Is that it's very, very, very different, and you can tell he does care. He does want to be intimate.
Yeah.
I
mean, still to be fair. Like, she is clearly still in a situation that she does not feel comfortable with.
Yeah, it's an arranged marriage.
Yeah, it's an arranged marriage that she was forced into.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you could still call it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We're talking about his. Yeah, we're more talking about his character.
But there's a huge difference between the book and because at the end in this, okay, she's kind of into it at least, whereas in the show it's pretty much just rape, right?
Yeah.
But it's the same kind of thing. So she, she kind of undresses him, like takes out the, help with the braids and his hair, and stuff like that. And then, he kind of undresses her.
Right.
And, same kind of thing.
Yeah, but here, I mean, even the description, which I think we were going to read some of this,
you want me to,
well, yeah, I think you should.
We're gonna. Here we go.
We're taking this from PG-13 to rated R.
Yeah,
folks.
it's rated R here. So it took a long time, and while he sat there silently watching her, when she was done, he shook his head, and his hair spread out behind him like a river of darkness, oil and gleaming. She had never seen hair so long, so black, so thick. Then it was his turn. He began to undress her. His fingers were deft and strangely tender. He removed her silks one by one, carefully, while Dany sat unmoving, silent, looking at his eyes. When he bared her small breasts, she could not help herself. She averted her eyes and covered herself with her hands. "No," Drogo said. He pulled her hands away from her breast gently but firmly, then lifted her face to make her look at him again. "No," he repeated. "No," she echoed back at him. He stood her up and then pulled her close to remove the last of her silks. The night air was chilly on her bare skin. She shivered, and goose flesh covered her arms and legs. She was afraid of what might come next, but for a while nothing happened. Khal Drogo sat with his legs crossed, looking at her, drinking in her body with his eyes.
It's well described. I just want to say. I mean, can we say that?
I'm not done.
Okay.
After a while, he began to touch her, lightly at first, then harder. She could sense the fierce strength in his hands, but he never hurt her. He held her hand in his own and brushed her fingers one by one. He ran a hand gently down her leg. He stroked her face, tracing the curve of her ears, running a finger gently around her mouth. He put both hands in her hair and combed it with his fingers. He turned her around, massaged her shoulders, slid a knuckle down the path of her spine. It seemed as if hours passed before his hands finally went to her breasts. He stroked the soft skin under until it tingled. He circled her nipples with his thumbs, pinched them between thumb and forefinger, then began to pull at her, very lightly at first, then more intensely, until her nipples stiffened and began to ache. He stopped then and drew her closer and drew her down on his lap. Dany was flushed and breathless, her heart fluttering in her chest. He cupped her face with his huge hands, and she looked into his eyes. "No," he said, as she knew it was a question. She took his hand and moved it down to the wetness between her thighs. "Yes," she whispered, as she put his fingers inside her.
Let me just ask you a question. Let me just ask you a quick question, okay?
Was Gur bouncy when he was writing this?
I think he was.
I think he was.
Let me ask you a question. Okay. It does not... It sounds like Khal Drogo's done this before.
Yeah.
It sounds like he knows what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Boy, he had her relaxed. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I could go for a good massage right now myself, you know?
Mm-hmm. There was consent at the end there.
Okay.
So...
Okay.
Just going to say,
yeah. So that was fun. That was fun. Well done, my friend.
Hey, yeah, no.
So that was the end. We read you right to the end of the chapter there, but I think that was worth it.
Yeah, and again, I think the biggest takeaway, and I think this is another reason we kind of talked about it last week. I think this is another reason why they did it maybe slightly differently in the show, where so Dany does kind of like him here. And I think it just made more sense. It's like when you only have so much time in the show, it seems weird. It's like we're gonna show it like this, and then she kind of learns.
Yeah, because it's not that doesn't happen. That
because she does love him. She does grow to love him in the show.
Right, and even right now, I wouldn't call this love by either. They're both just they're still courting each other, even though they've been wed. Right, they're still This is the first interaction they've ever had, and so you can imagine this is what he would do to sort of win her over, right? Because it's what he wants.
He chose her.
Exactly, he did have to choose her, right? Yeah,
and that's one thing we don't really get is Khal Drogo's character, because he's told through the eyes of Daenerys.
Yes.
Is that Khal Drogo also has very big ambitions.
Yeah.
Like he's never lost.
Right,
and, he's the first Khal to say, like, oh, I will go across the narrow sea and conquer the Seven Kingdoms.
Isn't he like 27?
Yeah.
Okay, which is interesting. That's
same age.
Aegon. Yeah, Aegon, right? And he's got that itch to go, conquer something.
Right, and he calls his son. He even calls his son like, my son is the stallion who will mount the world. So not him.
Right? No.
Yeah.
He wanted a son, and he was really, it would be neat. It's almost like a Midnight Sun Twilight reference here.
Yeah.
Getting the perspective of Khal Drogo would be interesting. So for sure.
So
all right, guys. So that's
okay, guys. That's kind of it because we hit up our cool connection. So do we have a Raven?
We do. Yeah. So let's dive into this here. We got a Raven recently, and let me see who this is from here because I have the Raven itself. By the way, tell them where they can send us a Raven at.
Hit us up on Facebook. You can hit us up on iTunes or on our Gmail, which is btkcast@gmail.com, or send us a phone message. I think you have about 3 minutes.
Yep.
614-547-2350.
Awesome. This was sent by Clinton L. So we'll leave it there. He says, you mentioned the Night King and how in the show he doesn't have a background at all, but you were so close to talking about the history of the Starks and the magical cold woman and the man who had no fear. And this fearless Stark declares this cold woman his queen and he her king. And what if, he says, I don't know, what if, but I thought, he says he doesn't really know what if, but, but he thought that we were getting close there and that you didn't mention, what really happened to the cold woman. And he kind of wonders, I guess, what does happen there, if we have any speculations or thoughts on that. Just started listening today. Great job.
The cold woman, is that the woman that the Night's Watch commander goes after? She's like the female White Walker, the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch?
I think that's, what he's talking about, yeah. So
there are theories that she is buried in the crypts of Winterfell, and that, because they talk about how part of the crypts are sealed.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And actually, if you go look at Talking Thrones breakdown for they're called a plot leak of season 8, but I believe it's more of just some crazy fan theory that the Night King, who's gonna march on Winterfell, actually goes down to the crypts at some point, and that's kind of that's kind of thing. And they talk about there's a lot of speculation as to why was Winterfell built on a hot spring? Was it just for purposes, or some people say like it's built on a hot spring to potentially lessen the power of maybe, that woman if she is buried in the crypts and all of those kinds of things. Yeah.
I think this is one we're going to have to come back to and dive deeper into. And I think we should make a note of it and honestly use it in Follow-Up Friday. Go ahead.
Well, I will say we did a YouTube video kind of on the Night King. There was a theory we watched.
Right.
There was a theory we watched about it. Is the Night King called Jon Snow? It's kind of like saying Voldemort. It was a theory that someone else had covered, and someone had asked us, sent us a link to it and watched it. And in that guy's original theory, I cannot remember it, but I know we reference it in our video. He mentions that a lot of people believe that the cold woman, or the White Walker female that the Night's Watch commander leaves and becomes the Night King, is that she is, I cannot remember her name, but essentially the woman that Azor Ahai stabs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that to become Azor Ahai. There's some people who believe.
I got you.
Nisa, I believe.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just kind of. Yep. No, you're right. Yeah, I have heard that. Yes, and we talked about that in the YouTube video that we have up. So yeah, you guys should definitely check that out. One thing that I think, the only thing that I know about this is that it's just the way they talk about her skin color and her how cold she was, right? I think the quote, I'm trying to find a quote here from it. I think it's, let's see later. There it is. He fell in love with a woman with skin as white as the moon and eyes like blue stars. He chased her and loved her, though her skin was cold as ice. And then it goes on to say that eventually once he, gives her his seed, in a sense, they come back to the Night Fort, and they rule there as king and queen.
Yeah.
And this is, again, the 13th,
commander
of the Night's Watch. Now, real quickly.
The Night King's corpse queen is, if you want to wiki it.
Okay. Cool. Now, I think, we had talked about what happens to Bloodraven when he goes beyond the wall. I think this is something similar to that, right? It's the idea that these walkers or whites or others are able to manipulate and convince these men to do these things. So
yeah, I'll read I have the quote pulled up here. This is from the wiki. This is A Storm of Swords, chapter 56, Bran 4. A woman was his downfall. A woman glimpsed from atop the wall with skin as white as the moon. You said that. Fearing nothing, he chased her and caught her, and he loved her, though her skin was as cold as ice. And when he gave his seed to her, he gave her his soul as well. He brought her back to the Night Fort and proclaimed her as queen and king. With strange sorceries, he bound his sworn brothers to his will.
Yeah. But so some sorcery going on there, right? For sure. So there's and actually the wiki does link you to some fan theories with her and the others, and like Matt had said, the Night King's corpse queen. So
yeah, and here's the thing. I think this is another thing that could be in the books and explain a lot more about the Night's King. I do not think, even if this is actually the end game for Night's King and how that kind of story goes, I do not think at all that it will be done in the show.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Although I don't know,
you're right. Yeah.
I mean, they're going to have to explain, I hope, some motivation for the Night's King and the White Walkers. This is up, the next season.
Yeah.
Maybe they do, and it's like a real short thing, but I think it'd be a lot to do in such a limited time.
Yeah, I think so too, for sure. So. Hey, when we post the link on Facebook, hit us up and see if you guys are listening. Do some research on that maybe, and let us know what you think about the Corpse Queen. For the 13th Commander of the Night's Watch. Interesting that they do come back and rule and are able to persuade and convince all their that's a pretty big deal. Something that had to be put down by the Stark and Winterfell.
Yeah.
So there's that. All right, and that's the our Raven of the week there. And you can send those again to btkcast@gmail.com, my friends. Now, we did have some other Ravens, but we are saving those for Follow-Up Friday. Please, this will be posted on Monday. We won't record Follow-Up Friday until late Thursday night.
Right.
So we can post it right away, get as many comments in as we can, and post that Friday for you guys. So
yeah, and real quick, a big help to us to almost help more guarantee that you'll see it in Follow-Up Friday. Make the subject Follow-Up Friday.
Yeah, that would be great. Actually.
That'd be great because we get a lot of emails just from new people and patrons,
sure,
and stuff like that. And so that if you really want it to see it, email us at btkcast@gmail.com and say in the subject Follow-Up Friday question.
Right, that would be great. Even if you post it on Facebook somewhere, you want to copy and paste it, yeah. Or if you do post on the thread, it's fine. Just title it Follow-Up Friday question.
Exactly. Yeah, because we'll usually post the links. They send us a Raven.
Yeah.
Follow-Up Friday.
I even do a control find search, and I just look for. I can look for that pretty easily, so that would be great. Now, if you have recap stuff and you want to talk about things that happened in the chapter and the reread, again, that's stuff that we can do in Follow Up Friday. But if you want something to be discussed in the recap,
absolutely,
that works as well too. So if we field it after Friday, then that we'll get into the next episode. So
absolutely.
All right, guys. Let's see here. Thanks so much. So we joined the. We need to man the wall.
Man the wall.
Right. Again, Matt and I are working towards that trial by combat. And
and
we legitimately though have people now who can help us forge our armor.
Absolutely. And here's the thing is we've been getting a lot of patrons lately, and we have a lot of patron content. We actually have a patron episode we're gonna get going after we record this.
Right, Mead, Meat, and Cheese, man.
Yeah,
episode 3.
Another Mead, Meat, and Cheese, episode 3.
Black Council's coming soon.
Black Council.
We are literally deep in working on that, and that is coming by like June 1st. I mean, it should be out by June 1st.
Yeah, we actually have some very big theories that we have not seen a lot of people cover, and Sir Ezra and I have just
thought of one today.
Yep.
And I don't even want to mention it because I'm afraid someone's going to go do it.
Somebody's gonna steal it. But that's another thing. If there's very specific theories you guys want us to cover, I believe Lady Kelsey sent me one today, a Hodor theory.
She did,
so
yeah.
so that's
we have one too. One of the ravens that we saved, which sometimes the ravens are so good. It was Samuel Juniper sent us a theory that a Night's Watch theory that is so awesome and full of goodness that it almost would be a whole episode. You know, so we'll see how that goes. So
yeah, absolutely. And I will say we got a couple new patrons. And so one I want to get to right here. Actually, just been kind of messaging as we've been recording here. I am Jared of House Gebhardt, a very small house in the north. We have supported the Starks since the dawn of the Age of Heroes. We ask not for much, and we take very little. However, when called upon our banners, a brown bear on a red field will fly for the Starks. We may not be a large house, but we are a fierce one, and we will give all we have to the old gods and the Starks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's go. Oh, wow.
So, yeah, seems like he and Lord Adam Parker might be some good friends, bannermen, and liege lords to the Starks. So,
that's what I'm talking about. Now, I'm starting to see somebody.
To their liege lords, the Starks. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and we the Google Doc, by the way, we also have a couple more. Lady Lauren, who's hit us up and taken the black, again can call in and give her, Night's
Vows, and we'll get your sigil going. So.
Right, we'll get that going. We've also got House Roth, I believe, Lady Morgan, and so it's been this is neat. This is what we love creating the community.
Absolutely.
Now Matt and I did say we kind of made an executive decision. We are going to each week, we kind of plug one of our patrons at the beginning of the show.
Right.
We might start to alternate that and actually start the show off with our knighting ceremony.
Absolutely.
Which I think we're just going to read what we have in the book. There's 2 different variations we can do. I like one, Matt likes one, so we might do it a little differently each time because I think that's fair. I think that's something that happens in the books.
Yeah, and if there's something, say, custom or specific you want to do, just hit us up and we'll see what we can do. I know we have one very kind of custom, specific one we want to do.
Yeah,
so,
we do.
Yeah,
we do. So anyways, that will be fun, and I just can't wait to get all that stuff rolling. So next week you should have your first knighting ceremony to listen to.
Absolutely. So, all right, guys. Well, it is time to say farewell. We want to thank you for playing the Game of Thrones. Our next episode will be Chapter 12, Eddard 2.
If you like our podcast, don't forget to subscribe, like us, write a review, or leave a comment, or send us a raven at btkcast@gmail.com. And I do want to mention that leaving us a review on iTunes is thank you for everyone who has done that. We've seen a few more recently, and those really do help the show
a lot. It is an easy, free way to help the show. We will see you in a week, and remember that winter is coming.